In a quiet southern town, two white cops, notorious for their arrogance, stopped a black man one fateful evening. What they didn't expect was for their routine harassment to spiral into something that would shake their entire world. They mocked him, belittled him, and left him humiliated on the side of the road. But the very next day, their victim walked into the station, not as another powerless face to ignore, but as their new chief of police. What happens next is a jaw-dropping tale of justice and transformation. How does he handle this betrayal? And what lesson will it leave behind? Nestled in the heart of South Carolina was a small, tight-knit town, a place where everyone seemed to know each other's business, but few were willing to welcome outsiders. The streets were lined with historic brick buildings, yet beneath the charming exterior lay an air of tension that had lingered for decades. This was a town where tradition ruled, and change was met with wary eyes. Aaron Davis, a seasoned officer with a reputation for integrity and fairness, had just moved to this unwelcoming town to take on the role of police chief. With over 20 years of experience in law enforcement, Aaron carried himself with quiet confidence. He believed in justice, not just as a principle, but as a way of life. Yet, despite his credentials, his arrival stirred unease. It wasn't just that Aaron was a newcomer, it was who he was. A black man in a position of authority in a town still grappling with unspoken divides. Whispers followed him wherever he went, and skeptical eyes watched his every move. Aaron knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he had no idea that his first challenge would come from within his own department. The morning sun cast a golden hue over the sleepy South Carolina town as Aaron Davis stepped into the local cafe. Dressed in jeans and a simple button-down shirt, he looked like any other passerby, blending seamlessly with the crowd of regulars sipping their coffee and sharing small-town gossip. He hadn't officially reported for duty yet and figured a quiet moment here might give him a feel for the town he was about to serve. The smell of fresh brewed coffee filled the air as Aaron took a seat in the corner, silently observing the space. A loud burst of laughter broke his focus. At the counter stood two uniformed officers, Jake Harper and Mike Turner. They seemed relaxed, leaning casually against the counter, their voices carrying across the cafe. "Look at this guy," Jake smirked, nudging Mike as his eyes flicked toward Aaron. "Probably just another drifter passing through. Bet he doesn't last 2 days in this town." Mike chuckled, taking a sip of his coffee. "If he's smart, he'll be gone before sundown. Folks around here don't take kindly to strangers sticking their noses where they don't belong." Aaron kept his composure, listening carefully. Their words weren't just dismissive, they carried a tone of superiority, tinged with prejudice. The officers, oblivious to who they were speaking near, continued their banter, laughing at their own jokes and boasting about how they handled outsiders. Aaron didn't say a word. He simply took mental notes, how they carried themselves, their arrogance, their lack of regard for professionalism. As he finished his coffee and prepared to leave, he glanced their way once more. His calm gaze lingered for a moment, unnoticed by the officers. He walked out, knowing his first challenge wasn't just the town, it was these two men. The morning air was crisp as Aaron laced up his running shoes, preparing for his usual jog. The outskirts of town were peaceful, with winding dirt roads cutting through quiet fields. Aaron ran at a steady pace, his mind focused on the challenges that lay ahead as the new police chief. But peace was fleeting in a town where the past clung tightly to the present. The low rumble of a patrol car broke the silence. Jake Harper and Mike Turner cruised up behind him, their windows rolled down. Jake was the first to speak, leaning halfway out of the car. Well, look who it is," he sneered. "Didn't we tell you folks like you don't last long here?" Aaron slowed his pace, calmly glancing over his shoulder. "Morning, officers," he replied evenly, not breaking stride. Mike snorted from the driver's seat. "Morning? You think this is some kind of friendly neighborhood? You don't belong here, stranger." The patrol car screeched to a halt in front of Aaron, cutting him off. Jake stepped out, his hand resting on his belt. "Empty your pockets," he barked. Aaron raised an eyebrow, standing firm. "And why would I need to do that?" Jake smirked, leaning in closer. Because I said so. Before Aaron could respond, Mike joined him, roughly grabbing Aaron's arm. They searched his pockets, finding nothing but a house key and a phone. What's this, a secret weapon? Jake quipped sarcastically, holding up the phone for the growing number of bystanders to see. The situation escalated as Jake and Mike forced Aaron into the town square. They tied his hands to a lamppost with zip ties, claiming it was for disturbing the peace. A small crowd began to gather. Some laughed, taking out their phones to record the spectacle. Others stood silently, their expressions uneasy but unwilling to intervene. A few murmured among themselves, questioning the officer's actions. Aaron, despite the humiliation, remained calm. His silence was deafening, his steady gaze scanning the crowd. He noted every face, every reaction. Jake leaned in, taunting. "You'll think twice before running around here again, huh?" Aaron didn't respond. He wasn't just enduring this, he was observing, strategizing. This wasn't just an act of humiliation. It was the first step in dismantling the rot within the town. By the next morning, the quiet streets of the small southern town were buzzing, but not in the way anyone expected. Videos of Aaron's public humiliation had spread across social media like wildfire. The short clips showed a calm black man, tied to a lamp post, surrounded by smirking cops and a divided crowd. The hashtags #SmallTownShame and #JusticeForAaron were trending. Outrage poured in from all corners. Comment after comment condemned the officer's actions, calling them out for abuse of power and racial prejudice. "This isn't 1960, one user posted, echoing the sentiments of thousands. By sunrise, national news outlets had picked up the story. Reporters began descending on the town, their vans parked along the main street. Cameras rolled as journalists sought answers. "What really happened here yesterday?" one asked, microphone in hand. "Were these officers enforcing the law or crossing a line?" Jake and Mike, oblivious to the outrage brewing online, basked in the newfound attention. They laughed as they watched the clips, proud of their moment in the spotlight. "We really showed him who's boss," Jake chuckled, leaning back in his chair at the precinct. Mike smirked. "Bet he won't be jogging around here again anytime soon." But the storm was brewing, even if they couldn't see it yet. As reporters began questioning their actions, the officers brushed it off. "We were just doing our job," Jake told a local journalist, his tone smug and unapologetic. Meanwhile, the town itself began to fracture. In diners and on porches, heated discussions broke out. Some stood firmly behind Jake and Mike. They were just keeping the peace, one older resident insisted. That guy was asking for trouble. But others weren't so sure. "Did you see the video?" a younger woman countered. "He wasn't doing anything wrong. This isn't how we should treat people, no matter where they're from." The cracks in the community widened as more voices began to speak out. Parents worried about what kind of example the police were setting for their children. Business owners worried about the impact of bad press. And, for the first time, whispers about the toxic culture within the police department began to surface. As Aaron watched the chaos unfold from the sidelines, he knew the moment for action was fast approaching. The town was waking up, and it would never be the same again. The morning air was heavy with tension as Aaron sat in his modest home, sipping his coffee. His phone buzzed, another call from the department's main office. The voice on the other end was stern, filled with concern about the rapidly growing scandal. "Chief Davis, this situation is spiraling. You need to take control." Aaron calmly reassured them. "I've got this handled," he said, hanging up and setting his cup down with deliberate precision. Today was the day. By mid-morning, Aaron walked through the town square, now a hotspot for reporters and curious onlookers. Dressed sharply in his full chief of police uniform, his badge gleaming in the sunlight, he was the picture of authority. The uniform, crisp and commanding, drew double takes from people passing by, their curiosity quickly turning into realization. When Aaron stepped into the station, the usual chatter among the officers came to an abrupt halt. Jake and Mike were leaning casually against their desks, laughing as they watched another rerun of the viral video on Mike's phone. "Look at his face," Jake chuckled, slapping Mike on the back. Their laughter stopped instantly when they noticed Aaron standing in the doorway. Their jaws dropped. The man they had humiliated just days before now stood before them, not as a victim, but as their new chief of police. The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Aaron walked in with measured steps, his gaze sharp and unwavering, commanding every eye in the room. "You too," Aaron said, locking eyes with Jake and Mike. "My office." "Now." The officers hesitated, stunned. "Wait a second." Jake stammered, unable to complete his sentence. "I'm your new boss," Aaron finished, his voice steady and authoritative. "And we need to have a little chat." Aaron didn't wait for a response. Instead, he turned to the rest of the department, gesturing for everyone to gather in the briefing room. The officers shuffled in awkwardly, curiosity and unease written on their faces. Jake and Mike followed reluctantly, their bravado crumbling with every step. Once everyone was assembled, Aaron stood at the front, projecting the viral video onto the large screen in the room. The footage played, showing Jake and Mike taunting Aaron, tying him to the lamppost, and laughing as the crowd watched. Gasps filled the room, followed by an uncomfortable silence. Aaron turned to face his team. "This," he began, pointing to the screen, "is what the world sees when they look at this department. This is what the people we're supposed to serve and protect think of us." His voice carried a mix of disappointment and resolve. He paced slowly, addressing the room. "We wear this badge to uphold the law with honor and integrity. Not to abuse our power. Not to humiliate or degrade. And definitely not to perpetuate the very racism and prejudice we're supposed to fight against." Jake and Mike shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their faces red with embarrassment. Jake tried to interject, "Chief, it was just a misunderstanding." Aaron cut him off sharply. "No. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a blatant misuse of authority, and it reflects poorly on every single one of us in this room." Turning to the two officers, Aaron's tone grew even firmer. "Jake. Mike. You didn't just humiliate me, you humiliated yourselves, this department, and this entire town. And now the whole country knows it." Jake opened his mouth to defend himself again, but Aaron raised a hand. "Save it. The evidence speaks louder than anything you could say." The room remained silent as Aaron delivered his final words. "This department needs to change. Starting today, we're rebuilding the trust that's been broken. There will be accountability, and there will be reform. If you can't meet the standards of honor and integrity this badge demands, you don't belong here." The officers in the room nodded, some visibly moved by Aaron's words. Jake and Mike, however, sat frozen, the weight of their actions finally sinking in. Their smirks were gone, replaced by shame and uncertainty. Aaron looked around the room one last time. "This is your chance to be better. Don't waste it." With that, he walked out, leaving Jake and Mike to face the consequences they could no longer avoid. The next day, the announcement came swiftly. Jake and Mike were officially suspended, pending an internal investigation into their actions. The mood in the station was tense as the two disgraced officers packed up their desks. Some colleagues avoided eye contact, while others exchanged glances that silently said it was only a matter of time. Aaron watched from his office, his expression unreadable, knowing that accountability was the first step toward real change. The investigation wasn't just for appearances, it was thorough. Witnesses from the cafe incident and the town square were interviewed, and video evidence was reviewed in detail. The community demanded answers, and Aaron made sure they got them. He wasn't interested in sweeping the issue under the rug. His goal was clear: transparency and justice. But Aaron didn't stop there. The scandal became the catalyst for a department-wide transformation. Within days, he rolled out a series of reforms aimed at rebuilding trust between the police and the community. Mandatory diversity and anti-bias training sessions were scheduled, and officers were encouraged to participate in community outreach programs. Aaron wanted the people of the town to see the badge as a symbol of protection, not intimidation. The pushback came almost immediately. A few officers grumbled about the changes, accusing Aaron of making a big deal out of nothing or trying to fix what wasn't broken. Some even hinted at quitting, unwilling to adapt to the new standards. Aaron met their resistance head-on, addressing their concerns in a direct yet measured tone. If you're here to serve and protect, these changes shouldn't be a problem. But if you can't uphold the principles of integrity and respect, this department isn't the place for you. While some resisted, others began to see Aaron's vision. Officers who had been indifferent to the town's deep-seated issues started to come around, inspired by Aaron's unwavering commitment to change. They saw him not as an outsider, but as a leader who wasn't afraid to stand up for what was right. Community outreach events, once rare, became regular occurrences. Officers were seen walking the streets, talking with residents, and attending local events, not as enforcers, but as neighbors. Slowly but surely, the town began to notice the shift. Trust was fragile, but it was being rebuilt, one interaction at a time. Aaron knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but as he watched his team take their first steps toward reform, he felt a glimmer of hope. Change was happening, and this time, it was here to stay. In the weeks that followed, the town of South Carolina began to change. The incident with Aaron had sparked a deep reflection within the community. Many of the residents who had once turned a blind eye to the undercurrents of systemic racism now found themselves questioning their own beliefs and actions. Conversations that had been taboo or uncomfortable began to take place, at the cafe, in the local schools, and even around the dinner table. It was clear that the town was at a crossroads, and the people were beginning to recognize the harm caused by years of prejudice. Aaron, in his own quiet way, had become a symbol of resilience and justice. Despite the challenges he faced as the first black police chief in a town steeped in tradition, he carried himself with a dignity that demanded respect. Many in the community, who had once viewed him with suspicion, now saw him as a leader who was committed to not just enforcing the law, but also building a more inclusive and fair community. He had become a beacon of hope, showing that one person, standing up for what's right, could begin to change the course of history. The lesson was clear: racism is not a problem that can be solved overnight. It's a battle that requires courage, persistence, and the willingness to stand up, even when the odds seem stacked against you. But with each act of courage, each conversation, each change in perspective, we move one step closer to a better, more inclusive world. Aaron had shown that standing up to racism wasn't just about confronting others, it was about confronting ourselves and pushing for a future where all people, regardless of their race, can truly be free. This story isn't just Aaron's, it's one that reflects a struggle many face today. Share this video, and let's continue the conversation about fighting racism in our communities. It's important that we all reflect on how we can contribute to creating a world of justice and equality. How would you have reacted in Aaron's shoes? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you're inspired by Aaron's journey, check out our next video about overcoming racial discrimination, where we continue to explore the power of standing up for what's right.